Shelley Atkins wasn't supposed to be in the law enforcement business anymore. 10 years after a fire had left her torso, upper shoulder, and neck a rope of massive scars, not to mention ruined her hip, she'd hung up her hat, so to speak, taking up an anonymous benefactor's offer of a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Paris. Retired FBI agent Pierce Quincy, she remained certain, she'd initially salved her wounds with French crepes, French wine, and French museums. Then she came home, set herself up with a steady schedule of walking the beach, hiking the woods, keeping herself busy. Her replaced hip did best when in motion, the soreness of an active day far better than the knifing ache of idleness, and roaming the great outdoors. She was less likely to remember. A woman with her number of scars was definitely best off not remembering. Then 2 years ago, the sitting county sheriff, an outsider whom the locals had never quite taken to, had resigned abruptly. Some whispers of impropriety, but nothing that it could prove. Either way, the county found itself sheriffless. And Shelley, she wasn't a beautiful woman, not even pretty, and that was before the fire had turned half her body into a Picasso painting. She had the solid build of a plow horse and the kind of no-nonsense face that invited men to talk to her at bars while still eyeing the prettier girl 3 seats down. She had no family, no children, not even a pet goldfish, because she was never entirely certain she wouldn't take off again. Basically, 8 years after the fire had nearly killed her, Shelley had managed to add nothing and no one to her life. Mostly, she missed her job like hell, not to mention the people she'd once worked with, so she'd run for sheriff. And given that she was still remembered as something of a hometown hero for saving a federal agent from that fire, the locals had enthusiastically voted her back into office, bum hip, scarred torso, and all, which meant, Shelley reminded herself now as she drove, lights flashing, that she had only herself to blame. A report of shots fired this time of year? Not good for the local sheriff, nor the business leaders who counted on the quaint coastal town's sleepy reputation to remain, well, sleepy. Hour was still early, just after 8, which argued for either cranky good old boys who were still half skunked from their excesses the night before, or disillusioned tourists who'd finally figured out that camping in a heat wave wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Normally, August in these parts wasn't so bad, especially with the ocean breeze helping keep temperatures reasonable, but the mercury had been topping 100 for the past 5 days and bringing tempers with it. In a rural community of 5,000, where the number of guns probably did outnumber the total population, maybe a report of shots fired had been only a matter of time. Dispatch had provided the address, a gas station convenience store at the edge of town, and Shelley had personally taken charge. Both her deputies had already logged overtime working the normal summertime nuisance calls, so she felt it was the least she could do. And while she wasn't happy about gunshots in her town, she wasn't terribly concerned. Overall, Bakersville, Oregon, was most famous for its cheese, trees, and ocean breeze. Sure, it also had a growing meth problem, but policing in these parts was hardly big city stress. Headed north, having already made it through the blinker you'll miss it downtown, Shelley was approaching the county's biggest claim to fame, the cheese factory. Even with lights flashing, she had to blare her horn to weave her way through the thick line of RVs and campers already stacked up, waiting to turn into the parking lot. Given the already hotter-than-hell morning, most of the tourists were probably planning on ice cream for breakfast. When she completed this call, Shelley might join them. Community policing, eat ice cream, mingle with locals, sounded like a plan to her. North of the factory, traffic died down and Shelley picked up speed. Road was narrower here, winding through sharp bends as it twisted its way along the rocky coast. Then, 5 miles after a turn-in for yet another campground, Shelley arrived at her location. The Easy Gas. Shelley swung in, killing the lights while appraising the scene. She saw one truck parked in front of the twin gas pumps, a battered Ford that had seen better days. Otherwise the place appeared quiet. Shelley got on her radio, alerted dispatch that she'd arrived. Then, picking up her broad-brimmed hat from the seat beside her, she placed it on her head and climbed out of her white sheriff's SUV. First thing that struck her, the absence of sound. That, much as anything, set her nerves on edge. In a hot, hazy August, when the local businesses were as busy as they were gonna get, the quiet here, it wasn't a good kind of quiet. Shelley's hand went to her holster. She automatically shifted her stance sideways, making herself less of a target. As she approached the front of the worn-looking convenience store, smell hit her next. Coppery, thick, an odor even a small-town sheriff knew better than she would have liked. The faded red pickup, mid-90s, was to her left, the open glass door to the small convenience store to her right. Shelley paused, considering. Vehicle appeared unoccupied, which left the store as the main area of concern. She moved closer to the exterior wall, bottom half blocked by giant coolers of ice, upper windows plastered with various posters advertising cheap beer. Hand still on her holster, she tucked herself beside the ice coolers and peered through the open door. Nothing to see, and again, nothing to hear. Not the ring of the cash register, not the murmur of voices as the clerk rang up the sale from the truck owner. Just that smell, thick and pungent in sweltering August heat. Then, a sound did reach her ears, soft, steady, the drone of flies. Lots and lots of flies. Shelley knew then what she'd be finding inside. A brief pause while she did the smart thing and radio dispatch for backup. Then, shoulders squared, she unsnapped her holster, removed her Glock 22, entered the store. First victim had gone down 10 feet inside the entrance. Body was on its back, spread eagle, a bag of chips just beyond the 20-something male's outflung hand. Local, was Shelley's first guess, as she eyed the worn jeans, unlaced boots, grime-smeared t-shirt. Probably a farm boy, she thought, then caught an extra whiff of something rotten and quickly changed her mind. Fishing, definitely a boat hand or a particularly pungent job like that. Maybe he'd just gotten in from an early morning haul and had come dashing in for a snack. Now he bore a single shot to the forehead, more bloody holes in the chest. Given the slack features, chances were the kid had never even seen it coming. Next body was behind the counter, female this time, 18, 19, second victim, or certainly shot after the salt-jonesing customer, because the female had seen it coming. Body had fallen in a twisted hump, as if she'd tried to run, only to remember she was boxed in, imprisoned by the counter in front and a wall of tobacco products to the back. She'd gotten a hand up. Shelley could see the bullet hole straight through the palm. She didn't need to see the rest of the damage to know it had been fatal. Inside, the sound was louder. The damn flies, drawn by the smell of blood, and now concentrated on twin targets. It's funny, the things that can get to a woman. Shelley had seen terrible auto accidents, hunting tragedies, even a few combined incidents. She knew gore and dismemberment. Small towns were hardly the idyllic sanctuaries portrayed on TV, and yet the flies, the damn flies. She focused on breathing through her mouth. Slow, deep breaths. Procedure. Now, more than ever, protocol mattered. She needed to alert her detectives unit, plus the county D&M's office. Calls to make, work to do. A movement to her left. Shelley whirled, hands together, arms straight, already raising her Glock. End of the candy aisle. Right before the wall of cold drinks, she spotted some kind of wire rack. Quivering, she tucked closer to the wall, making herself less of a target. She headed down the outer aisle, where she could come at her target from the side. She was sweating profusely, the beads of moisture stinging her eyes. Flies, the drone of flies, interrupted only by the shuffling of her heavy-soled boots against the linoleum floor. Despite her best intentions, her breathing was too loud, ragged in the unnaturally still air. She wasn't wearing a vest. Too hot, too uncomfortable, and even responding to a call of shots fired. Bakersville wasn't the kind of town, not the kind of community. She of all people should have known better. End of aisle. She slowed. Rack wasn't moving anymore. She strained for the sound of movement. Say, an unknown shooter creeping down the other side of the aisle or sneaking up behind her. Nothing. Deep breath in. Release slowly. 1, 2, 3. Sheriff Shelley Atkins pivoted sharply. Glock straight ahead, homing in on the target, but the aisle was empty, the wire rack of snack bags still, no movement from anywhere in front of the wall of refrigerators housing cold drinks. Shelley straightened slowly, aisle by aisle now, step by step, but whatever had caused the disturbance was long gone, maybe just an errant breeze or Shelley's own nerves. Either way, she stood alone in the store, two bodies, the endless drone of flies, the stench of fresh blood. Shelley unclipped her radio from her shoulder, preparing to get on with the business of next steps. Just as her gaze came up, she spotted the third victim,